Hi, my name is Chris Granger, and today we're welcoming you to our quarterly Cool Davis Coalition meeting and a special webinar on building a resilient community. We're really glad to have you with us today. We're going to start our afternoon with a quick overview of the meeting. And then we're going to do what we call lightning presentations and a check-in from our working groups and partners that are here today. And after that, there'll be a brief presentation by one of the Cool Davis board members, Jan Trost, about Cool Davis and Cool Davis Coalition planning for 2020 and into 2021. And then at 5 o'clock, we will start the Building a Resilient Community webinar and panel discussion. So we're really glad that you can join us today. Any quick questions from any of our panelists about logistics? We would like all of you in attendance, if you have any questions for our presenters today, please place those questions in the Q&A. And use the chat function, if you have it, for looking for other kinds of conversation. We are recording this event, and we'll be providing it to you afterwards through an email, along with a quick survey. Kind of follow-up survey about this event. So thank you again for attending. So we're going to start with our first group, and I'm unsure if Lynn Nittler has joined us online yet. Is Lynn in with us yet? If she's not, we'll skip to one of our next working groups. So for those of you who are not familiar, the Cool Davis Coalition has a number of working groups that do things that are related to our mission of greenhouse gas reduction, but they're kind of play spaces for large groups of people who have common interests. So with that, I will ask Richard Bode to maybe give us a few words about Davis Electric Vehicle Association and what you're doing in the next month or two.
Great. Thank you, Chris. So I'm here representing the Davis Electric Vehicle Association, otherwise known as DEVA. We're a bunch of divas. So, we look at our role too as, informing Davis residents about the availability of EVs, their benefits to the climate, and benefits to air pollution, clean air, and also all the fun it is in driving electric vehicles. So, we meet, as you can see on the slide too, we meet every other month on the second Wednesday. With our next meetings on December 9th. So we have actually been on Zoom meetings all this year. Can't remember if we had a February meeting or not. We might have had February as our last meeting, but everything else has been on Zoom. But we've actually been able to have some pretty good presentations. One of the things we used to do that we have had to postpone too is EVs at the market, farmers market, which was where we actually have an EV owner comes, brings their car, and we sit out there and we talk to people who are interested in EVs and present them with a lot of good information. One thing I would say for this next year, 2021, I think it's going to be an exciting year for looking at electric vehicles and, transportation emissions from both cars and trucks represents in California, I think it's over 40% of total greenhouse gas emissions. It's an amazing chunk of the greenhouse gas emission problem. And a lot of it is just driving back and forth to work. So this year, I think we're going to have an amazing number of new EV models that are coming on the market. A lot of them have extended range. What I mean by extended is over 240 miles of range on the vehicles themselves. There's now a big push to get new charging stations all over the state of California. And we're seeing a lot of good possibilities. So I think we're going to have a good, exciting year here. And our outreach is always, our meetings I think are always fun. It's tied between availability of new EVs and also technology. There are a lot of people like to just hear about the technology itself, but anyway, look forward to the next year. I think that's all, Chris.
Thanks, Richard. And now we'll hear from, well, it'll be me because we don't have any of our representatives from the Davis Futures Forum, but this is an occasional community forum, often quarterly, that's focused on community planning and sustainability. And they have lots of speakers coming from other parts of the state and the world who are significant leaders in sustainable planning. And you can sign up for that group on the Cool Davis website. And also Cool Cuisine is a working group of Cool Davis. You may remember their burger battle from last year. They both have a meetup location on online and plan occasional potlucks and nights out at restaurants, although they've been doing less of that recently. And they also have a Facebook page that you can connect to. So I encourage you, if you're interested in plant-based dining options and sharing recipes, is a great group to get involved in. And Leslie, would you like to talk for just a minute about WaterWise?
Sure, absolutely. So WaterWise Davis is a small advocacy group that is actually on hiatus right now. But when we were meeting, we were working on an ordinance for residential gray water for new construction and addition work. And the NRC recently approved a draft. Our outgoing planning director, Greg Mahoney, got that finalized before he retired, and Kerry is part of that whole process, a sustainability coordinator at the city. And I'm overdue to chat with her about the status of that that ordinance. It's there, like I said, there's a draft that's there. And, you know, generally gray water is a great way to reduce our use of potable water. And it's one of many strategies that WaterWise advocates for.
Thanks, Leslie. So we'll go back quickly to our interfaith slide. I don't think that Lynn Nittler has managed to get on the line yet. She's having trouble logging in. So the Interfaith Alliance for Climate Justice has been around since, I think, 2012. They've had 7 interfaith conferences. The steering committee for the group meets the first Thursday of the month from 12:30 to 1:30, now by Zoom. And if you're interested, you can sign up on the Cool Davis website, or you can contact Lynn Nittler directly at her address here. So those are our active working groups, and we encourage you to get involved if any of these activities appeal to you. And there's a lot of different things going on, both online and in different ways to connect in the community. Thank you. So next on our agenda, we will hear from the newest working group of Cool Davis, and they are helping to sponsor today's event. Gail? Or I'm sorry, Jan?
Okay, yeah, I don't think Gail's joined us yet. So yes, Resilient Embodied Action Davis Yolo is about bringing a new awareness to the effects of climate change. Basically, it's about the personal effect of climate change on our bodies, on our psychologies. And we are responsible for inviting Bob Doppelt to speak here this evening. And he's going to outline the work that he's been involved in for a number of years now, encouraging the state and a lot of different organizations to look at the impact of climate change and other stresses and traumas on basically ourselves as human beings, and how can we adopt new policies, adopt programs, and adopt a new way of responding to resilience in our communities and personally. So we hope that Cool Davis will see this as part of the climate action initiative, and that we'll be able to work with Cool Davis as we are today to really educate people about the impacts of climate change. And a lot of the impacts we don't really acknowledge because they're biopsychosocial, spiritual impacts. And Bob will outline to us later this evening a program where we can adopt policy at the state level, where we can look at programs at the community level to actually be in a better position to respond to the trauma of climate change and to actually grow and improve our communities and our personal resilience. So stay tuned, because Bob's a great speaker and he'll be on the line soon. I guess I should add that one of the things that we're looking for Cool Davis and for Ready is that at the moment there's Gail Kennedy and I from ACES Connection, and we're looking for people to join the Ready working group so that we can start to promote programs, for example, community trauma resilience programs that are starting to be rolled out in a lot of other communities in across America and worldwide. And it would be great if we could do the same here. So anyone who's inspired by what happens tonight and what they hear tonight, it would be wonderful if you'd reach out and consider joining the Ready working group and adding energy to the work that we think needs to happen. And I see Bob has joined us, and hopefully we'll rename him so that he doesn't appear to be me. Thanks, everyone.
Thanks, Jan. So now I'm going to turn this over to Jan Troost, who is a board member with Cool Davis and also a very active member of the Davis community. He's the current chair of the City of Davis Utilities Commission. And Jan's going to talk a little bit about the kind of planning work that Cool Davis is doing right now.
Good evening, everyone. It's great to be here, and it's great to see so many people here joining us from the coalition and other areas. Welcome. 10 years is a long time to have done a lot of good things. And it's also a good time to look back and look forward at what we've done, what we may need to change, and how best to move forward. And we've started that process just within the last 3 weeks here at Cool Davis. And we hope you will play a very important role in that. One of the pieces, of course, is us looking at ourselves internally and what we've accomplished, what we need to change. And we're in that process right now, but shortly we're going to be going out to you. And we're going to be asking you to give us feedback about how we've done and where you might see us going, what you need and believe we should be doing, a range of questions. I can't underscore how important that is right now. There are so many really good groups out there doing great work. And how do we fit in? How do we all work together? How do we unite to help our whole community, and not just Davis, but the broader community of Yolo, and perhaps regionally? How do we respond to climate change? I mean, many of you read the climate assessment for California, and you know that the starting comment of that is, it talks about the science, but it says the biggest challenge we face in addressing climate change is the lack of collaboration, working in silos. So we will be getting out to you with a survey, perhaps even calling some of you to remind you to please turn those in. But it's really critical because together we can address the silo question. We can work more collaboratively with one another, better than we've been doing in the past. I'm not saying at all what we've been doing good work, all of us. But I just want to say that that's a short sort of statement about where we are in our planning. But it's really critical that we get good information. All of us have been hammered by the various things that have happened just in the last year. And I won't go into the litany. We all know them well. We could say we have some good news. Some of us may believe in a change in administration right now. And we hope that brings perhaps a different perspective on the challenges that we face from the federal level. But nothing is going to change as much as the need for us as individuals to do what we can do locally. You know, that whole notion of all changes, you know, think globally and act locally. I know there's a lot of people looking at policy change out there, and that is really critical work. How do we balance that with the individual work that needs to get done in all of our communities, and especially communities that haven't been as engaged as some of us have? It's one thing to be a city. It's another thing to be sitting out in Esparto or other communities around Yolo. And we know there are people looking to work in that domain too. And we need to be working together, and your feedback to us is going to be really important. So I'll stop here and thank you all very much for the work that you do to make a difference in our county and in our city. It's very much appreciated.
Okay, thank you. Thank you, Jan. Really appreciate you being here today to share a little bit about what we're doing with our planning. And I really do hope that folks will get involved. Jan is looking for a few good team members who want to help with the planning process. So if that's something you like, he's glad to have more people on board.
Please.
The next thing, so our beginning of our webinar is officially at 5 o'clock. So I thought maybe I'll give anybody who is in the audience right now, did you have anybody have any questions for that they wanted to put in the Q&A for about the Cool Davis's working groups, or anything about the planning? Also take a minute if you like, and you can always share your thoughts in the chat. And we'll get started here in a minute or two. I wanted to check in with Melissa. Is Melissa on at the moment? Yes, she is. About whether you'd be willing to do the land acknowledgement and acknowledgement of the Native community as we begin.
Yes, hi.
Hi, Melissa.
All right.
I see you have the lovely Yolo Hills behind you.
Yes, and so grateful to be here. Thank you for inviting me. And it's important to take a moment to acknowledge this land where we are teaching and learning and living, and know that for thousands of years, this land has been the home of Patwin people. Today, there are 3 federally recognized Patwin tribes: the Chihil-Dihi Band of Wintun Indians of the Calusa Indian Community, the Quetzal-Dihi Wintun Nation, and Yosho-Dihi Wintun Nation. The Patwin people have remained committed to the stewardship of this land over many centuries. It has been cherished and protected as elders have instructed the young through generations. We are honored to be gathered here today on their traditional lands to do teaching and learning in many ways. And so I am a visitor, and many of us are visitors, and I feel like that is part of the first step, is to recognize ourselves as visitors to the land, and that there are lessons to learn here about stewardship for everyone, Native and non-Native.
Thank you, Melissa. And so with that, I think we're running a little early. So, but maybe that'll give Don a chance to say, have time to say all the things he would like to say today, and to do a nice introduction for Bob.
Chris, there is a question in the chat. Do you want to
Oh.
look at it?
Yes, absolutely. Can you read it for us?
The question from Brenda Carey is anyone working on helping local farmers go organic?
I wonder, Don, if you might just do a quick feedback around, there's a lot of food discussion going on in the county and including sustainable practices.
Sure, I will touch on that. I was thinking I would use a part of the time as a panel member to respond on that point, but just I'm so excited about the program today. This is exactly what needs to happen. So Jan, I really appreciate you bringing this topic and this lens on the intersection of climate action, climate disasters, the human condition, the cumulative trauma and the fatigue that many are feeling these days, mental health issues, and community systems that can support each other and the planet that we live on. I think it's a perfect evolution of the discussion of the conversation that's happening in Davis. I remember being at the scene when 10 years ago, a little over 10 years ago, we launched the Cool Davis initiative as a corollary to the City of Davis initial climate action plan. Of course, now the city is updating that climate action plan, and I think they're looking at some pretty robust activities. Yolo County in 2011 followed with a climate action plan that had many components in it, and including reliance on agriculture as an ongoing contributor to our place on this planet. But this is a very special time for us. A little bit later tonight, I'm going to need to sign off of this call because, in fact, we are dealing with some of the same kinds of issues with a series of listening sessions to those who experienced the most recent wildfire, the LNU complex fire that hit us in August. And that fire, well, let's see, it was in August. So that fire destroyed hundreds of homes in Napa and Solano counties. Of only about a half a dozen people lost their homes in Yolo County, but the trauma crosses the lines just as air quality does and just as water does. So the borders are not much. And so we've been holding a series of listening sessions among the residents of Greater Winters area, both on the Solano side of Poudre Creek and the Yolo side of Poudre Creek, to understand their perspectives and what happened the night that the fire came through. And I know that Bob Doppelt has some experiences and some similar issues with Lane County in Oregon. And I'm really excited about the construct that he brings to this conversation, issues of individual presence and purpose and institutionalizing responses at a community level. I'm not going to get into Bob's talk because he's going to do it much more justice than I would ever do, but I want to just call your attention to his article in the Eugene Weekly on September 17th, 2020. If you haven't had a chance to read that, I urge you to do so because it lays out a very realistic, pragmatic approach, names the problem and gets to the root of it. So Bob Doppelt is just the perfect speaker as a kind of a launch for our conversation here in Davis and Yolo County. And I'll speak later in the panel about some of the things that we are doing in the county as a way of helping round out that discussion. The other panel members, Melissa Moreno, who you already heard from, is an ethnic studies professor at Woodland Community College and a member of the Yolo County Board of Education. You also have Mayor Gloria Partida, who also serves as one of the founders of the Davis Phoenix Coalition, the go-to human rights group in Yolo County and in Davis. And you have Tessa Smith with the Yolo County Mental Health programs. And I'm sorry, but I'm leaving somebody out, and I just don't mean to do that. But when we get to this, Kerry will give us the rest of the panel members and talk about it. With Rachel Hartsough, who understands how the arts can be a healing factor as well as an economic driver for a community like Davis. So we've got a wealth of talent as always here. So Bob Doppelt is Executive Director of the Resource Innovation Group. This is a nonpartisan social science-based sustainability and global climate change education, research, and technical assistance organization. He's also affiliated with the Center for Sustainable Communities at Willamette University, and he's a faculty member, an adjunct faculty member in the Department of Planning, Public Policy, and Management at the University of Oregon, where he teaches systems thinking and global warming policy and planning. I'm really impressed with what I've come to learn about Bob so far, in that he works and thinks at the intersection of many disciplines, and that's what it's going to take. You know, we couldn't launch a rocket to the moon if we had left people in their silos. We couldn't deal with any of the major changes that our species has addressed over millennia if we compartmentalized our interests and our engagement. And so when it comes to when you see somebody who's really working to bring together the ideas and the language of one discipline to apply to problems that others might not have seen as relevant to that discipline, that's exciting to me, and I know it's exciting and interesting to all of you on this call. So with that, Bob, I really appreciate you being here, and just know that this audience, this group of engaged individuals in Davis and throughout Yolo County is just that. They are engaged. This group is not passive. They're ready to work, and they're excited to hear from you. So thank you for joining us tonight.
Well, it's my pleasure. Thank you, John, for the introduction, and hello, everyone. And thanks to Jan and Gail and others who made this happen. I think what Jan said was really appropriate, that it's the siloing and the lack of collaboration that's held back much of the work on climate change, but it's also a very similar problem to what's holding back efforts on resilience building and mental wellness and resilience. And that's really what I want to talk now to you about. Just as a sidebar, but it will help you understand where I'm coming from, that in addition to what Don just described in terms of my background, I'm actually trained as a counseling psychologist and in environmental science. I've sort of tried to bring those two perspectives together throughout my career. And my organization, as part of the University of Oregon, ran around the country, one of the very first organizations in the nation, helping states and counties and others with their first climate action plans. And it was after Superstorm Sandy hit Southeast Florida, where my organization had organized the Southeast Florida Climate Resiliency Compact. Even though from Oregon, we organized this, the 4 major counties come together to plan for and prepare for sea level rise, storm surges, et cetera. That's when we saw the major mental health and psychosocial problems skyrocket after Sandy. That's what led me to realize we need to focus on this issue. And so we started what we call the International Transformational Resilience Coalition. We like these very short, snappy titles, so you can call it the ITRC for short. So I'm not sure who's changing the slides, but let's go to the first slide. There we go. Some of it didn't show up here. I always try to start by making sure we're all on the same page. And that is, we have to get our heads around the fact, and most of you who are involved in the climate field fully understand this, we're in the midst of a civilization changing event. This is, the climate emergency is not just about single event disasters that end and give people time to recover. This is something that's going to go on for the next 100 or more years. And even just some of the recent research, there's a 20% chance now that within 3 years, by 2024, we're going to see the global temperatures exceed the 2.7 degrees Fahrenheit threshold that scientists believe are going to activate irreversible impacts. And if it doesn't happen, then it's going to happen soon afterwards. We're not going to prevent it from going above 2.7. The question is, can we control it enough to then bring it back down, the temperatures back down? And the other thing to realize, it's not just a climate crisis. It's actually a climate ecosystem biodiversity crisis. They're all connected. And just recent research again back in April, under current emissions path, and we haven't seen much, the pandemic might change a little bit of that, but not much. We're going to see abrupt collapses in ecosystems and catastrophic biodiversity loss within this decade, starting in the South and tropical oceans and then spreading north. I urge you all to read the Nature article about this, because I think it's really tells us a lot about what we need to do. And we even saw recent research just a couple of months ago about the Gulf Stream is weakening. And these are just some examples that it's clear we have precious little time to prepare all of us for the psychological and emotional impacts that are coming our way. And what's really important about that, besides the suffering that people feel and that our communities feel, is that kind of emotional and psychological suffering prevents us from engaging in realistic, meaningful actions to reduce the climate crisis to manageable levels. So it's directly connected. Next slide, please. So these are things you know, but I just want to clarify that one of the impacts, but only one, is the more frequent and extreme and prolonged disasters that we're seeing already. Each year, almost 50 million Americans, 47 million Americans experience some type of disaster, and that number is likely to at least double. My guess is it's going to go quite a way above that, which means a third of the American population every year will get impacted by one of these. And then, of course, the disasters shift around. So everyone is going to have impacts. And we're seeing greater increases in that in many locations worldwide where they're more vulnerable to some of these disasters. And 20 to 50% of the people impacted by a disaster can experience mental health problems. And it's also important, just like with COVID, the pandemic, important to realize that the mental health problems from disasters usually most of them do not appear immediately during or even right after disaster. It might take 3 to 6 months or more before they appear. And it has to do with what we call the phases of disasters, where people have to go after they get help from their community rallies in what we call the honeymoon stage. They have to go back and put their own lives together on their own. And that's what often triggers that. So even with the pandemic and the wildfires you've experienced, the wildfire we had up here near Eugene, Oregon, where I live, we're going to really need to get prepared for serious impacts 3 months, 6 months, or a year out. Next slide, please. And just as important, we often don't think about this with climate change, but those disasters are going to be intermixed with something similar to what we're seeing with the pandemic. And that is cascading disruptions to ecological, social, and economic systems that are very surprising. We couldn't expect it. Oh, a pandemic comes along, you have to cut down on your job. Well, that cuts your income, and then you can't have your kids go to school. I mean, all these kind of cascading disruptions. I think we're already seeing many similar kinds of cascading disruptions with the climate emergency. And what it does is produces continual toxic stress pileups, these accumulations of these very serious stresses that affect everyone. So we've got these disasters that affect the people impacted, a third of the population eventually, but everyone is affected by these kind of toxic stresses. And you can look through there and see the kind of stresses that, and you can look at which one are you already experiencing, or if you're not directly experiencing it, are you worrying about yourself or your children experiencing these kinds of impacts? Next slide, please. So what does this lead to? And by the way, my organization, the ITRC, has members all over the world, mostly in North America, meaning Canada and the US, but a growing number in Europe, in Africa, Asia, New Zealand, Australia. And here's what our members are seeing in many different places. There's the individual mental health impacts, severe anxiety and depression, PTSD, complicated grief, vicarious trauma, increased suicidal ideation, and really the most profound, I think, that influences all of those is a real sense of hopelessness. There's nothing we can do to prevent these impacts, people believe. And there's also psychosocial impacts. And what we mean by that, the distinction is where a personal mental health impact affects other people. So it becomes psychosocial. So we see relationship problems. We're seeing that already up the Mackenzie River, where people, spouses are having a hard time figuring out how they're going to pay for things, and it's causing these tensions and breakdown. But also it's going to increase spousal and child abuse and neglect and ACEs, adverse childhood experiences. Drug and alcohol and tobacco use is already going up. We already found that even in the Mackenzie. Racism and aggression and violence occur. And there's good research that shows that just as temperatures rise, so does violence. It's really connected because of the way it affects our brain. And we end up with community and societal trauma. Again, collective hopelessness. All of those stresses can aggravate or directly cause more physical illnesses and diseases. They cost us more money. They cost families, businesses, and governments more money. And what I was talking about before is really true. When people become traumatized and they have a fear-based, they live in a fear-based reaction that puts them into a self-protective survival mode, they're very uninterested in external issues like greenhouse gas emissions, especially that might cost them money. They're just trying to survive. So this really, all of this also threatens our ability to reduce the climate crisis and the biodiversity crisis and the ecosystem crisis to manageable levels, which creates a vicious cycle where you get more climate impacts, more mental health, psychosocial impacts, et cetera. Next slide, please. So it's really imperative that we start now to get out front of these issues as much as we can and prepare everyone, individuals, families, organizations, and communities for these traumas and toxic stress pileups leading our way. And I think it's great that Cool Davis is engaged with this and can play a real critical role. And now let's dive into what do we do about it. Next slide, please. So the first thing to realize is that the climate crisis and the ecosystem and biodiversity crisis, the combination of that, is not just affecting quote unquote vulnerable populations. They are clearly, there are groups and populations based on where they live, there's their income levels, the history of racism and other kinds of systemic oppressions that are clearly more at risk. But everyone is impacted by climate change and these impacts. And so we really have to focus on population level mental wellness and resilience, not just at-risk populations, but a special emphasis needs to be placed on assisting vulnerable and at-risk groups. But we can't stop there. In fact, we can go into this in the question and answer. Often if you, that the people who appear to be healthier prey on those who are more vulnerable in the midst of disasters. So unless you actually deal with the entire population, you could make things worse. But there's three goals to building population level mental wellness and resilience based on the research my organization and experience of my organization and our members. First, you want to give everyone, all adults and all children and youth, the ability to manage their distress in some way. So they feel they have influence over their situation. We call these presencing skills. You want people to have confidence that, oh, this is really bad, but I can function here. I can take care of myself. I've got some skills. I've got social supports I can rely on. I've got other mechanisms that I can use to keep myself well, if you will. But that's not enough. That's necessary, but not sufficient, because we also have to help everyone find new ways to learn and grow from adversities, turn towards them and learn about ourselves and the world, and then find new sources of meaning, direction, and hope in life. And that's really going to be critical. We call these purposing skills. So that's what Don was talking about before, presencing and purposing. We can get into the examples of those, but those two have to be taught and shared with people through age and culturally appropriate methods. So it's not you got a skill you want everybody to learn. It's working with the groups to find out what resonates with them. What are they already doing? They might have forgotten. They might have not practiced the certain skills. It might be just getting together for dinners or meals with your family or with the group, or other kinds of culturally based skills. You really want to tap into where the populations are, what the groups are, and the individuals are. And just as importantly, to make all that possible, you want to create a local culture of mental wellness and resilience by institutionalizing these kinds of practices into the principles and practices of local volunteer, nonprofit, private, and public organizations, as well as public policies. And we can talk about that more in a sense. One way to do that, of course, is, as an example, is have local organizations sign memorandums of understanding saying, we're going to incorporate these principles and practices into our organization for our employees, for our clients, for our customers, for our stakeholders. But we'll come back to that. Next slide, please. So this is what I want to spend most of the time on now that we have left. We call it the wheel of change for building community-based population-level mental wellness and resilience. First of all, what we're talking about is not a trauma treatment program. Single person therapy and even disaster mental health, while very important in the midst of the climate emergency, are totally insufficient to deal with the scale and scope of the tsunami of mental health and psychosocial problems we're going to see unless we get out front of this. We need to actually focus not on assisting people after they're traumatized, but on building skills and capacities and the infrastructure and community to help prevent them and heal them when they occur. When people still, after learning some of these skills, getting engaged with neighborhood groups that I'll talk about in a second, when people still can't function or are at risk of harming themselves or harming others, then they need to be able to connect with a clinical therapist. But the primary focus has to be on prevention and on community-based efforts to do that. So starting up at the top of this, you see we call organize an RCC composed of a diverse group of uncommon partners. RCC stands for a Resilience Coordinating Council, but you can call it whatever you want in your community. But the emphasis is on the first two words, resilience. So you're building resilience skills and capacities, not treating trauma, and coordination. You want to get people together to coordinate their activities. So the way you do this, what this means is you bring together a group like Cool Davis, but Cool Davis might reach out to the local YMCA or YWCA, the school districts, private businesses, all others, and figure out who is it that represents or can work with every different population and sector in our community. Bring people together who connect with those populations into this group. Spend some time trying to build trust and develop the capacity to problem solve together and plan. And that group becomes the Resilience Coordinating Council that together plans and implements strategies to build population level mental wellness and resilience. There's a number of different strategies for doing that and ways to organize that. And you can form a board of directors, a steering committee, lots of different ways to do that. And then have these innovation groups on the outside working with different populations. We can talk about that in question and answer. One of the first things this Resilience Coordinating Council should do is try to assess the type of climate traumas and stresses that have already exist and might come down the road in the future, but also assess the strengths of the community and the resources that already exist for resilience. Go out and talk to people, have lunches, have coffee clatches, or Zoom calls, whatever. And just find out, what do people use now? What skills, capacities, resources? It might be the local church group. It might be some other sort of things. And what's the obstacle to people using those resources to really maintain and enhance their mental wellness and resilience, and groups too. And then based on that assessment, and this is going on in many places. I'm sure this kind of work is going on in Davis right now and in Yolo County. It's a matter of pulling it all together, because then you want to create a vision and a goals and a strategy for building population level mental wellness and resilience. And one of the visions, you just have to take a vision and say, 1 year from now, in the ideal, what do we want to have achieved? Then you back up from there and you go, what can we achieve in 6 months to get us close to that vision? You work on that. You might do it 2 years out, and what can we achieve in a year? You work on that closest approximation to the ideal. Once you get that, you look out again and you say, what's our vision now? It often looks very different because you've learned a lot, and you repeat the same kind of process. But one of the keys for the vision is to identify gaps, who's not being served, or what populations, what sectors don't have access to information, to skills building, et cetera. And you bring in more people who can really enhance, fill those gaps and enhance that. And then you get into the strategies. So one of the first ones is to educate everyone in mental wellness and resilience building skills, and these presencing and purposing skills. So many school districts here in Oregon and other places are teaching mindfulness, for example. But that's only one kind of skill. There are many others. There are body-based skills, and these are all simple, self-administrable skills that anybody can use to calm their mind, body, and emotions. What's really happening when we get traumatized is that our brain is activated. The fear and alarm center of our brain is activated. That releases neurochemicals into our body to prepare us to fight back, to flee, or if it's overwhelming, we freeze. And what it's doing is it activates the sympathetic nervous systems in our bodies to put us in this self-protective mode. The resilience skills actually activate the parasympathetic nervous system in the body that moderates that push and allows us to make wise and skillful decisions rather than always being in a stress-based fight, flight, or freeze reaction. Lots of skills we can talk about, different kinds. Again, age and culturally appropriate skills. But the next thing you want to do at the same time, this isn't linear. It's actually a circle. So you can start with any one of these. You got to make sure everyone is strong, is to help strengthen and connect social support networks in the community across economic, cultural, and geographic boundaries. Helping people realize how important it is to have 3 to 5 people that they can count on for unconditional emotional support or practical assistance. Helping people learn skills to do that who do not have those kind of things. Might be communication skills, it could be assertiveness skills, but also offering opportunities for people to meet other people. In many communities, this is happening with they close down the streets for a while in an evening, and you get the neighborhood out to meet each other and have coffee and wine or barbecue, whatever it might be. There's lots of ways to do this, but it's really a matter of really building those social support networks. And then at the same time, you want to try to empower local residents to take responsibility for resilience in their neighborhood. So this really involves building, and this again is probably going on down in Davis, it's going on around the country, building neighborhood hubs or resilience pods where 3 to 15 neighbors come together. They might form their own website or use another program that's already exists, where they share information. They get everybody's emails and phone numbers and addresses. They begin to share information. They develop strategies for walking the neighborhood or calling people in the midst of a disaster to see if they're okay, finding out who might need help, if you're walking down, you find out, oh, somebody's isolated, they need food, they need water. Let's see if we can get them that. But also that neighborhood pod or hub connects with external organizations that can provide essential goods and services during a disaster: food, water, shelter, electricity, etc. So that neighborhood hub knows how to contact the local utility or a local charity and bring those resources in to their neighborhood. So we can go into more depth about all of those. But as part of this, every time you start off, and we've seen these efforts start, you're going to make mistakes. You won't know what works, what doesn't. You have to test it. So you want to continually evaluate what you're doing, see what works, what doesn't, get feedback from the folks involved, learn from it, and continually improve the initiative all along the way. And then as you're doing that, you want to embed these practices, these mental wellness and resilience skills, strengthening social support networks, working at the neighborhood level, et cetera, into the local voluntary, nonprofit, private and public organization policies and practices, and get them to really embed this. And this is, we call it the wheel of change, because you want to make sure that each one of these spokes, so to speak, is strong enough that the wheel keeps moving. If one of them becomes weaker, the wheel becomes flat. And as you roll forward, you'll find some problems. So if people aren't getting the kind of resilience information and skills that they need, you'll have some problems, or if you're not working at the neighborhood level, et cetera. That said, every resilience coordinating council has to decide on their own where to start, what to emphasize initially, and how to make it work from a demographic and culturally appropriate perspectives. There's no one way to do it, but just keeping in mind, these are the things that we have found that in our research. And let me back up all the way and say that this work comes out of about a year's worth of really intensive research, and a team of grad students, as well as a team of 20 different people, mental wellness and resilience building experts, mostly from the US, but some from Europe and other places, who really helped us put this together. And so this is a model that's developed by looking around not just the US, but the world, in what kind of programs help best with preventing and healing individual and collective traumas. And that's what we're really dealing with here. One of the best, as an example, that we spent a bunch of time with is the program run by the Israeli Trauma Coalition. And they're dealing with ongoing terrorism. So we looked at programs that really, and efforts that dealt with ongoing traumas. They were just one example, but they have really one of the best. They call it a resilience center. We call it a resilience coordinating council. The resilience centers in Israel have no physical building. They just mean they brought everybody together to start to coordinate their efforts and plan out these kind of initiatives. Next slide, please. There we go. So I just want to close with asking you to imagine the benefits of having that kind of resilience coordinating council, this group that continually works together on an ongoing basis in Davis to build and sustain population level mental wellness and resilience. And when you get these that kind of infrastructure in place, when people are impacted by a disaster or these toxic stress pileups grow, that people are much more able to care for themselves, to maintain their own well-being by actually helping others and increasing the well-being of others. And let me just close with that one of the things that, the connection between this work and greenhouse gas reduction work, and between this kind of focus and climate resilience and preparedness focus, is very clear that, first of all, again, as I said, people are not going to be able to engage very well in mitigation or climate resilience work if they're in a fight, flight, freeze reaction all the time. They just can't do it. And more than likely will lash out and actually cause problems in those initiatives. So that's really important. And we want to prevent folks or help people develop the capacity to not retreat back into this self-protective survival mode, so they actually can engage in positive activities. And thirdly, really just as important, when we talk about purposing skills, helping people learn how to find meaning, purpose, and hope in life, what we often find is that by engaging people or encouraging people to engage in pro-social activities, they end up feeling better themselves. And almost as a sidebar, they help other people and or improve the condition of the environment. And that's not because it's a moralism, it's actually has to do with the oxytocin system in your body. You're actually releasing chemicals in your body when you do those kind of activities that feel good and make us want to do more. So it's an expanded notion of self-interest by engaging in these pro-social activities. And the more you can engage people in that, just like all of you, I'm sure, who are on this Zoom call already do that. You find some enjoyment from it. What's actually happening is it's actually a change in your body, in the physical makeup of your body. So with that, I'm going to stop and we can go on to the next session, next part of the session.
Well, Bob, thank you so much. You've given us a lot to think about and a framework for describing and considering aspects of our community that I think we're all seeing these days, more so than in other times. And I think it's the cumulative effect of the traumas I think we're all seeing in our community. And that's what we're going to do next is we're going to have a panel that will give you some immediate feedback, some comments about how this might fit in our local county and city. And then we'll open up to questions and answers. And our panel will be moderated by Kerry Daane Loux, who is the City of Davis Sustainability Coordinator and has been active for many years in pretty much all aspects of the life of our community, and is also very active with Cool Davis. So Kerry, tell us what we're going to do next, please.
Okay, thanks, Don, and thanks, Bob, for those really important comments. And I do understand that you're going to be able to stay for the panel and engage with everyone on the webinar after we have the panel. So we really appreciate that because we would love to hear your perspective on some of this. We have 5 panelists that will give their perspectives on what is happening in Yolo County. I'm going to give a brief introduction of our panelists, and each of them have been asked to respond with some brief comments around 3 minutes to some questions that were posed, or basically their perspective on what they've heard today. So I think you can keep those answers to the questions somewhat loose and let us know what you are thinking. And since we're keeping the presentation somewhat short, that will allow us to have the panel to have a bit of interaction with each other for some conversation and response, and then we'll open it up for questions from the audience. So our panel includes Don Saylor, who you've already met, Yolo County Supervisor since 2011. Don has also been mayor and city council member for City of Davis and has been a trustee with the Davis Joint Unified School District. Don has been a longtime champion of climate action, and I will add that he is the person that leads the Yolo County Climate Compact. That's not on his official bio, but I'm just going to add that. Gloria Partida is going to have to leave a little bit early, so I'm going to introduce her next. She's our second panelist. She's a longtime Davis resident and has been on the Davis City Council since June 2018 and currently is our mayor. She went to school at UC Davis in zoology and is a neurobiologist at UC Davis. Gloria has a long history of advocacy in the Davis community, starting with disability advocacy and participation in many school and community organization boards. Gloria is the founder of the Davis Phoenix Coalition, which promotes community inclusion. And I'm sure most of you know Gloria over a long time for her work in the community. And she also manages a small business with her son who has a disability and is active in raising her grandson. Melissa Moreno, who gave us our introductory land acknowledgement, is a professor of ethnic studies and focuses on education, community-based knowledge, foodways, and Indigenous leadership. She has focused also on Indigenous intergenerational trauma and has been involved in many ways in the community and the support of Native Studies faculty, and is a community leader in Yolo County. So I'm giving quick intros here. Tessa Smith, who is also one of our panelists, works in the Mental Health Services Act unit of Yolo County Health and Human Services Agency. She's an outreach specialist in mental health and racial equity and has been a member of Resilient Yolo, who is putting on this webinar since its beginning. And finally, Rachel Hartsough, the Arts and Cultural Manager for City of Davis, has been an art specialist for over 25 years. She designs creative opportunities and resources for artists of all ages and was previously at the Nevada Museum of Art and currently manages and established their Center for Art and Environment. She has been involved with environmental programs at the UC Davis Arboretum and works with many programs at the City of Davis, including staffing the Arts and Culture Commission. I'm not sure if that's the exact name. So that's our panel, and I'm going to let each of you, starting with Don, make some comments, and I will give you a gentle reminder if our time is going long, but we're so interested to hear from each of you and your perspectives. So Don.
Thanks, Kerry. So this weekend, this weekend, we just went through a recognition that it was 2 years ago Sunday when Davis and Winters and the residents of our two communities came together and raised funds and did what we do when neighbors are suffering. And this was in response to the fire, the Camp Fire in the Butte County area. Paradise was, the town of Paradise and some other little burgs were wiped out pretty much. And so we happened to have some personal connections to that group, and we held a series of fundraisers and contributed to them. Then in August 17th, we had a fire here in Yolo County in the countryside right behind me in this picture. And that fire actually took the house of one of the people who had escaped the Paradise Fire and moved over to English Hills in Solano County. So we got our honeymoon period for compassion and then moved on. Those folks were left to scatter across the country and the globe. And some of them, of course, are experiencing ongoing trauma. Some of them never left Chico parking lots where they're still striving for housing and jobs and ways to survive. So the compassion fatigue element in Bob's article really had an interesting point for me, and the area of disillusionment that I think those folks must be experiencing right now. One thing that I think that we need to tell you about is that what we've decided to do with the LNU fire, I think, is relevant to this conversation. because so often after one of these incidents, we might have a wave of compassion, or maybe we'll have a series of actions, or we'll have a couple town hall meetings and hear what people have to say. But they typically only have a few minutes if they're going to say anything. So what instead we've set up is listening sessions where we've spent hours and hours just listening to people on a Zoom call like this, tell us their real world firsthand experience. That's been so powerful, and it's something that I think we need to continue to do. It's been a partnership between myself, John Vasquez on the Solano County Board of Supervisors, and Mayor Wade Cowan from Winters. And we're going to tonight feed back to the people who participated what we heard and how we might, some ideas for how we might proceed. I think that's a model that I think we might deploy in some other settings as well. Yolo County Strategic Plan has something we called health in all policies. And I think that resonates for some of the themes that we heard tonight. So the idea is that whenever we're making a decision or adopting an initiative, the idea is to look at it through the lens of public health. How does it really affect the wellness in our community? And that's one of the nascent initiatives that we've got going. I thank you, Kerry, for mentioning the Yolo Climate Compact. The Yolo Climate Compact is going to be taking up a baton that we have been passed here. There's a group that some of the members of this group are on the panel or on this call tonight. The Yolo Climate Emergency Resolution Coalition brought a resolution to the Board of Supervisors to build on our sustainability plan efforts and our climate action plan efforts to really hit hard on the urgency of the climate emergency that we're facing here. And so we adopted a resolution, and in January we'll be looking at what next steps we take. Well, one of the thrusts in that resolution is inclusion. So one of the things that we see happening is that, and I think Bob touched on this as well, is that whenever we've got an issue of any kind, those who are least able to respond to it are hit the hardest, and they tend to suffer longest. And so with this inclusion focus, the Yolo Climate Resolution is going to be moving forward with. We're bringing to the next Yolo Climate Compact meeting representatives of the City of Oakland, and Kerry, I'm going to finish up with this thought. Representatives from an initiative in the City of Oakland that focused on the underrepresented, underserved populations and their place in the climate discussion. And I know this is an issue that Melissa will be able to touch on regarding Native Americans and other populations and their role, not just as recipients of some policy, but of engagement and bringing their competence to the fore. So there's a lot going on, and I look forward to more of this conversation. Thank you for letting me participate.
Thank you so much, Don. Next, we're going to hear from Gloria Partida, and I do know that there are some questions in the question and answer and in the chats, and we're going to have this comments from our panelists first, and then try to address as many of those as we can at the end. But as the panelists are about to talk, if you have a chance, you can see what the questions are. But Gloria, we'd love to hear from you, and so glad that you can be with us tonight. Thank you.
Thank you so much. I'm so glad that I could be here, and I'm sorry that I am, squeezed between two meetings today, and wish that I could stay to the very end, but I can't. And it's wonderful to see so many people that I used to run into on a regular basis, and I don't anymore, and I don't even get to run into a lot of you in the little boxes either. And so this is really quite fulfilling for me. I'm glad to see all these faces. And I was so glad to hear the presentation by Bob. I was, or I guess I still am, a neurobiologist. It was what my training was in. I've recently retired. But it was good to hear about all those neurochemicals. I know what each of them do. And so, and they are so important for all of us on a day-to-day basis. I have two hats, as was told to you in my introduction. I am the mayor of the city, and I'm also the chair of the Davis Phoenix Coalition. And in those roles, you know, I pay a lot of attention to our community and to what's going on with the citizens in our community. And what I have found is that from the city perspective, we get sort of all of the end product of all of the stress and the trauma that is happening with regard to COVID and with regard to climate change. And so all of the stressors end at our doors, as Don is well aware also. So we you know, hear from all the community members. We see the increase in crime. We see the increase in domestic violence. We see, you know, the struggle that parents have trying to keep their children engaged, and you know, trying to keep track of our vulnerable communities, people who become homeless because because right now, because of COVID, that's sort of on everyone's mind. But even before that, the effects of climate change do affect, you know, jobs, especially for the most vulnerable, especially for people who are roofers, for instance, for people who are working in the fields, for people who are working construction. You know, it takes more resources. The resources are stretched, and what it takes to do those jobs is harder, and the outcomes of the family dynamic are affected by all of that. And I remember when you know, for the first fire where everybody was raising money and everybody felt so good about that. I remember a story of a bunch of migrant families that were camping on the beach because they were afraid to go and, you know, to go and get shelter in the places that were being offered. And people forget about that outreach to the populations that are on the margins. And so I think it's really important for us organizations to always think about those that are on the margins. And so as as the chair of the Davis Phoenix Coalition, that this is a nonprofit that we run, and we work on diversity and inclusion. And the inclusion piece of that is really important when we talk about siloing. And so I understand that, you know, we're all doing this work and we all become fatigued, and then it just becomes one more item that you have to do to reach outside of your silo. And it seems like it would make it easier, but it doesn't. It actually is more tasks that you have to do. You have to think about how you're going to collaborate with other organizations, and sometimes it's just one step too far. In my own organization, we had a member of ours who a year ago, right about this time, committed suicide. And she was a wonderful person. And it was a wake-up call for us to realize that we have to take care of the people who are closest to us. Sometimes we don't even reach out to the people who are closest to us. So what we decided as an organization was that part of our organization as a nonprofit was that we were going to reach out to each of our volunteers and just ask, how are you doing? You know, to start our meetings with a check-in and to say, you know, what has your week, month been like? And then to have a person that we are responsible for checking in with. because the work that we do in nonprofits, and especially a lot of nonprofits, we do really heavy work. We have really deep conversations, and we address issues that are very wearing on our mental health. And I think that if you are volunteering for climate change, or you're volunteering for diversity and inclusion, your mind is filled with sort of that energy, which tends to be very dark sometimes. And so I think it's really important that we reach out to each other as just individuals. And the other thing that we've instituted in our nonprofit and at the city as well is to make sure that we have some fun, is to make sure that there are things that we are doing that have nothing to do with diversity and inclusion, or that have nothing to do with any of the projects that we're working on, where we are, we're just going to be goofy. And goofiness goes a long way, we've discovered. So those are the things that I have to share today, and I will be here until just about 6 o'clock.
Thank you so much, Gloria. And sorry for looking a little distracted. I'm having a bit of a crisis with my daughter who's traveling, so I'm trying to multitask here. So, but Tessa, I think we were hoping that you would speak next and give us your perspective on the presentation by Bob and some of the questions that we asked in advance. Thank you so much.
Well, thank you so much, Kerry. Mr. Doppelt, I so appreciated your presentation. Your animation shows so much excitement and fervor. I just felt like you were a kindred spirit. You covered very much the work that I do in informing people on what it means to be trauma informed, and how to keep resilience in people, and what it takes to be able to understand when somebody's becoming unwell. And I've never engaged in a conversation about climate. I care about our climate, but it's such a loaded word in this moment, where we do have those fires. Before we had the fires, we had the drought, and then we had COVID, and then we had a racial reckoning, and then, so climate is a very loaded word. All of us have covered the devastation that our people and we are going through right now in this moment, and it has been very traumatic. So I thought, rather than restate, I would talk about some of the things that we are doing in the county as well as in the community to try to help people keep their resilience, to get their bounce back on, so to speak. And so as an outreach specialist there at the county, I do mental health first aid trainings. I'm really proud to say that, I've trained thousands of people in Yolo County. I think the point I want to make is that when it comes to being able to help somebody that might be becoming unwell with depression, anxiety, whatever, due to all these different reasons, impacts on our spirit that we've already talked about, it doesn't take the professionals. In fact, given what's going on right now, there will never be enough professionals for all of us to go in and lay down on somebody's couch. But we can help each other if we know what we're looking at when somebody's in a struggle, and we're willing to reach out and ask if I can help you, and to offer some real genuine support. So that's the heart of the work that I do in the mental health department. It's in prevention and early intervention. But as an offering, I thought I would talk a moment or two about Resilient Yolo, which is part of my outreach, is one of the organizations I'm very proud to be a part of. Resilient Yolo is a group of really dedicated county school, nonprofit, and health professionals. And we're all committed to actively and intentionally reducing ACEs, which is adverse childhood experiences, as well as adverse community environment. And trying to reduce the trauma that's associated with those things is the work that we do. And we make an offering to our Yolo County community in the form of outreach and education and special programming. And inside of this group, we share information amongst ourselves about the best trauma-informed practices that are going on out there, new programming that are offered by our organizations, and we partner together on many different community events, and we partner with the community as well to build community resilience. And so my work at the county is similarly focused, but I also do work with the staff and with the community around racial and health equity as well. So we know that what Mr. Doppelt calls toxic stress pileups, they impact both our physical and our mental health. And any situation with our body impacts our mental health and vice versa. Those kind of things worsen each other. So it's really important for all of us to know how we can help each other and keep each other well. I wanted to mention one community engagement project that is offered by Resilient Yolo. It's called Be the One. And it's a practical guide that you can download that's being shared in some schools, being shared in some spaces. And it's a practical guide on building resilience in our families, in our workplaces, and schools and community by building connection and relationship with each other. You know what Mr. Doppelt called presencing and purposing at the population level. You know, so we have these great tools already at our disposal, and we have many heroes doing this work. But of course, we're not yet messaging in a way that gets us to that population level of engagement, and that's really hard. We are trying. We do try. But too often when sharing resources within our agency or in the community, you know, it never seems to fail that as I share these resources, somebody goes, oh, you do that? Oh, you have one of those? Oh, your organization is doing the same thing as we are? Really? And yes, really. So it's that coordinating element that excites me most about your presentation, Mr. Doppelt. Because what I'm saying is I think our community penetration rate needs the attention, because we've got resources and we've got tools and we're doing great work. But if we're going to get to a genuine population level of resilience, we're going to need some kind of coordinator factor. You know, so because I'm, for instance, rather embarrassed to say that I had never heard of Cool Davis before Gail invited me to come speak here, and says, but our work is connected, and I'm happy to be here. And you know, when it comes to climate change, and when it comes to what's going on in our communities right now, it's not just a Davis thing. And so I believe to build on and pull our resilience building resources for the edification of our entire county, we need some kind of centralized platform of some kind where we can engage and inform and educate each other and celebrate each other in a culturally, linguistically appropriate, to throw out the county terms, you know, way that knit us together so that we can stand and fall as more of a county. And so that our work informs each other, and we, when it comes time to pour resources, we can. And I think that this would build trust too. I think it would coax people out of those silos. And I think it would show the intersectionality in our relationships and our interests, and it will build a multicultural understanding. And I think that in this moment, and for more moments like this one, which, as Mr. Doppelt said, are heading our way. That would be the work before us. And thank you.
Thank you so much, Tessa. I really appreciate the conversational tone that you're all taking and, you know, speaking to each other and reflecting off one another. I think that's exactly what we wanted to do with this conversation, and we're going a little bit longer than we thought we might, but I think that that's important. And since I mentioned this before, I'll just throw in there the trauma that comes up when you don't expect it. My adult daughter is traveling with my 9-month-old grandson to take someone to the airport and had some arrangements fall through. And so I'm trying to, hopefully it's now arranged, but I did lose my focus for a few minutes there because it can, you know, when you're relied on to answer questions, you don't have a chance to know when that is going to happen. So I think we're all feeling the extra stresses of this odd life that we're living. And Rachel Hartsough has some perspectives related to how we deal with trauma through arts and culture, and probably some additional thoughts and comments based on what everyone has previously said. We're going to ask Rachel to speak first and then have Melissa speak last, and then hopefully we'll have some time for interaction and answering some of the questions or comments in the question and answer and chat after that. So Rachel, thank you.
Thank you, Kerry, and thank you to all the other presenters. I'm noticing, just as everybody's speaking about all these stresses and mental health issues, that I'm having to just continue to like breathe here because it's making me stressed out, like reiterating how stressed out we all are. So just want to acknowledge that to everybody. So I'm going to actually share the screen right now and share a presentation with you all. Is that coming up on everyone's screen? Okay. So I just want to give you a moment to read this quote. And I want to start by saying that there were so many amazing examples of art that I could use in this conversation about mental wellness and resilience. It was very difficult to narrow down examples that I wanted to share with you today. The artists in our community and so many other communities are working really tirelessly right now with really incredibly limited resources to use the arts to uplift the lives of their friends, families, neighbors, strangers. And as soon as the topic of this conversation was on my radar, literally every email I got, I was like, oh, there's another example. Oh, there's another example. It's just so many people in the arts community are really responding to this very particular thing right now. So what can the arts provide in the face of disaster or crisis, and how can they help us lead to healing? I'm sharing the cover of a report called Art Became the Oxygen, which is a report by the US Department of Arts and Culture, which, if any of you are familiar with that, is not actually a real federal agency. It's a de facto organization of people from around the country who are doing amazing things. And it was one of the first places that I was aware of this notion of artists as second responders, a concept that is growing now during the past few years, that becomes more and more common to see artists going into communities and engaging them in the process of healing in the wakes of fires, of shootings, of civil unrest, and other causes of human trauma. And it's a great resource, and I really encourage everybody to check it out, and I'll share it with Chris afterwards. Here we go. So what are we doing already in our community that demonstrates this type of resiliency, which I would say is responding to the purposing that Bob talked about in his talk. So when COVID first struck, one of our local artists and activists, Danielle Fedor, responded with a program called Street Art for Solidarity, Health, and Resilience, hiring local artists who suddenly found themselves out of work to create public art, acknowledging the communal celebrations that we were not able to gather for, and sharing positive and uplifting messages around the community to promote mental health and public safety messages to promote physical health. Understanding that these were two important things in our community that needed to be addressed. So what you're looking at here are two temporary pavement paintings, the one on the left by Candace Foster and on the right by Sarah Kraft, promoting a sense of unity and confidence in our community and building our collective sense of hope and resiliency. So back in March, after COVID began and the shelter in place had just started, another local artist, Kyle Monholland, solicited feedback from friends and community members through Facebook, which I'm guessing some of you on here even responded to, with a very simple prompt. And he said, if I could share one song with a stranger to comfort them today, what would it be? So scores of songs poured in from friends across the country, and he embedded them into a unique QR code, which is the little code that you see on this symbol, and kind of plastered them around town. And the project called Love You, Miss You, Wash Your Hands was born. So anyone walking by one of these sites could take their phone out and scan that little QR code, and a song would pop up and play for them and bless them with a beautiful piece of music that someone chose with love, specifically just for the sole purpose of providing comfort and joy to someone else who's most likely a stranger to them. And so each of these is different, and the project took on a life of its own. It was shared and easily replicated in other communities because basically it was just printing out a simple piece of paper that was put up someplace. And it was even used as an example with a long distance learning program, promoting kids to encourage others to be inspired. And so what you see in the lower right-hand corner is actually a child who participated from Akron, Ohio, who used this prompt and then created his own message, celebrating joy and kind of playing it forward. So another element that has happened in our community is something called the Solidarity Space in our Central Park. It's a grassroots initiative that was spontaneously erected shortly after the murder of George Floyd. The installation invites people to come together, of course, respecting social distancing protocols, for conversations and contemplation, and designates a space where the Black members of our community can feel included and validated and celebrated, and most importantly, safer than in many of the other public spaces. This project has been so impactful that the city is now working with the creators to design a permanent piece of public art that will continue to promote this type of inclusion in our community here and hopefully in many other locations. Yet another project. So I have to say I'm really proud that we have so many examples in our community. The Healing Arts Project, which some of you may have seen, this is just one example in it, is a collaborative initiative led by local artist NJM Vondo that explores art as a medium for healing. The artist invites the public to share their response to the prompts. What does healing look like to you? And what is a change you would like to see in the world? And this is one of the artists who submitted this work. There are many artists she's invited on a website to share artwork and then shares the prompts that people submit as well, responding to the question. So this is another project that you may have seen downtown. There's me in warmer weather. The Communal Art Project, which was conceived by the Downtown Davis Business Association, invited artists of all ages to participate in a community-wide art project focused on how we have all been coping with the shelter-in-place, social distancing, and isolation. And over 100 artists responded. Some of them are featured in this window here downtown. The art serves as a visual reminder of our shared and individual experiences during COVID and reinforces that we are in this together, promoting community and resiliency. So now I'm gonna take you outside of the immediate Davis community, some other examples regionally. So in the aftermath of several years of devastating fires, Creative Sonoma, which is an organization in Sonoma, supported the work of artists and organizations in the community to develop something called Arts Respond to the Fires, whose stated goal is to become a repository not only for our collective memory, but also for the remarkable work that is helping to lift us all to a better, more hopeful place. In this image, you see an artist, Shane Grammer, who went around and painted murals on the burnt out structures that remained in Paradise after the fire swept through their community. Art contributes to recovery and rebuilding efforts and helps us heal our communities through the power of theater and storytelling. This is an example from Parkland, Florida. In response to the horrific shootings at Stoneman Douglas High, David Best, who's a Bay Area artist most well known for his temples at Burning Man, worked with a grant from the Bloomberg Foundation and engaged the local community of Parkland to build and then burn something called the Temple of Time. So here you see the inside of it with him working on it, just to give you an idea of what it looks like. And then in the lower right corner is the temple actually being set on fire. And this is a really incredible space that he creates over and over again and goes through this ritual. And people bring their memories, they bring their stories, they bring their wishes and their fears, literally physically into this structure. And then they join together and they burn it. And it's very, very cathartic. So the temple was one of a number of community-wide creative interventions that were designed to bring the people together in that community to honor the victims and promote healing in the aftermath of what was an incredible community trauma. So the examples go on and on. The aftermath of Hurricane Katrina, the Extinction Rebellion, artwork made by young people all over the world, inspired sometimes by Greta Thunberg, Friday climate marches, and on and on and on. There are choirs for residents, community homeless shelters, urban murals, so many examples we can think of in so many places that respond to this need for community collection, collectiveness, and healing. From grand scale of museums to children's books to reimaginings of damaged and abandoned buildings, artwork is all around us and continues to grow as the need for human connection and persistence is challenged. And finally, as far as what we need, there's so much that's needed to keep the arts alive and strong. At a local, state, and federal leadership level, there needs to be true understanding and valuing of the potential power of the arts to support and heal and grow our communities so that our communities can thrive. We need true investment in the arts, and not just the financial kind of investment, but more importantly, in growing the public will to embrace and support the arts at all levels. We need expertise in teaching and administering and creating and promoting the arts. We need funding to fully realize the many, many projects that artists have imagined that have yet to be brought to life in our communities. We need to embrace experimentation and willingness to take risks and fail with art so that we can achieve some of our objectives. And we need to embed art into all of our daily systems: transportation, public safety, healthcare, economics, and community development. And finally, we need to educate the next generation of artists and patrons so that we continue to have art in our lives. Art raises our spirits and promotes joy and passion, and in an environment that may depend more and more on humans keeping their spirits uplifted despite ongoing hardships, art may be just the thing that can save us, hopefully. Thank you.
Thank you so much, Rachel. That was really quite inspiring. And I think we all need to, those of us that live in Davis need to do a tour around some of those locations. I know I've spent a fair amount of time in a couple of those public spaces, and it is really wonderful that we have the ability to do that here in Davis. We have one more panelist, Melissa Moreno, and because everyone has been giving such great perspectives and we're a little bit over time, I'd like to suggest that perhaps what we could do is hear from Melissa and then maybe some responses and comments from Bob. And Bob, perhaps you'd like to respond to some of the questions that relate directly to resilience and community health and trauma within the community that are in the question and chat. And of course, we'll make sure that Cool Davis and Resilient Yolo have a chance to respond as well. But I do want us to give a chance to everyone to speak, and then it's likely that we can have people stay on a little longer if they want to. But Melissa, we're looking forward to hearing from you as well. And then we'll hear a bit from Bob after that. Thank you.
All right. Thank you so much for inviting me. And I will make mine brief. I think that it's really important that you were able and willing to hear the native land acknowledgement. That is actually part of a movement that is taking place across borders for every community to acknowledge. And I'm talking about, like, you know, right now, as I've been attending so many different gatherings, people are actually starting every single gathering and meeting with a land acknowledgement. It is not only for and about Native people, but it is about recognizing and acknowledging that the land has a history. And this is related to where I'm coming from, which is ethnic studies. And in that tradition, part of what we've learned is Native American, American Indian, indigenous peoples have been displaced time and time again historically, either through colonial violence or through the destruction, the physical environmental destruction of tribal communities. And so dealing with a great deal of loss, grief, suicide. The largest numbers of suicide historically have been in Native communities among indigenous peoples. And so ethnic studies has been offering for 50 years a framework for us to know and acknowledge that Native, Black, African American, people of color across have their own histories and legacies where of identities and rich cultural traditions that are usually hidden from us in our schools and society. And so the work that we've been doing in ethnic studies for 50 years, and that right now we're even like doing it even more, is really helping our students in marginalized communities who have been traditionally silenced, overlooked, to be able to remember what legacies we come from and what traditions we come from, at the same time of acknowledging our identities, our intersections in identities as well. And, you know, recognizing the complexities and the intersections, like intra and intergroup relationships. So giving understandings about the complexity of identity for the purpose of collaboration, cooperation, and alliances. Like that's the purpose of ethnic studies. And the other is to be able to help our students understand historical and current power and oppressions that play out in all the different, you know, isms that we, you know, encounter in our society. And to know that not only is there, for example, racism, but there's also self-hate. And so there's the intra and intergroup, right? And so it's really you know, complex, and that there's other kinds of oppressions too that intersect with racism. Bob, I really, really appreciated that in your framework, you acknowledge that, specifically racism and, you know, other forms of oppression that we've already seen, right? We've been seeing historically, we've seen them, we've known them, but we were living a comfortable life, right? The honeymoon. I love the language and that you've brought this to our awareness, because even me, like I've so appreciated this presentation. You really inspired something in me, because I'm doing this work, but it does feel like, hey, I've been doing it in a silo. I haven't actually organized my neighborhood. I have been the one, Tessa. I've been practicing the one for like a year now, trying to reach out to former students one-on-one. And so I think what we've been offering, like I said, is understanding of identity, power and oppression, the legacy and resilience, and be present And when our students understand those like initial pieces and have that foundation, they can be more present. The person that I am right now, just engaging with you, is not who I was. It is ethnic studies who brought me here. And so that understanding that I stand on the shoulders of many, the understanding that I am a visitor here in Yolo County, which means the place of waiting. And that to understand that this place is a place for stewardship and the voices that we choose to uplift or not through the different projects is pretty important. And so I really appreciate you, Bob, encouraging us to get a little bit more organized, even those of us who have had certain frameworks of understanding that it's important to, be resilient, but now figuring out how to scale it in a different way. I so appreciate that. Last point I'm going to make that I've been focusing a lot. Most of my classes have focused on Mesoamerican indigenous histories. And so I've been really trying to help my students to build stronger connections with their parents, their grandparents, and their families. And the way I've been doing that is through the history, and they've been going home and asking questions about history. And with that, also acknowledging that we also have healers and we have medicine in our own home, in our own communities, that we've not acknowledged, that we've overlooked. And so trying to sort of help my students to uncover what sorts of, I guess, gifts they do already have, that they've not been present enough to, identify what those have been. So thank you so much, Bob, and thank you, Kerry, for inviting me. Really appreciate it. Thank you.
Well, thank you so much, everyone. I think that the key here is the interconnectedness of people and the interconnectedness of issues. And as we were discussing this, I'm not going to go on too much because I want to turn this back over to Bob, but we did discuss the fact that this would be the beginning of a conversation, not the end of a conversation. So I do encourage people to continue to put questions and comments in the question and answer. We will compile those. We only have about 10 minutes of the official meeting time left. So Bob, I'd love to turn it over to you to give us a great wrap up and then perhaps give Chris and Leslie and Jan and Gail a chance to say something right before the end.
Great. Well, thank you. Those are all incredibly wonderful comments. My reaction to all of them is yes to all of the above. So I think that's great. So let me just, I've tried to take notes, but let me just comment on a few things and I know we don't have much time. Melissa made some just very important points, that the importance of helping people, especially people of color that have experienced ongoing historic and ongoing racism, become aware of and remember their own cultural traits and patterns and practices, because they know how to heal themselves. But they need to, often they have forgotten that, or they didn't learn it because it hasn't been passed down in a way that's helpful. So it's important to do that. But you can also help other people in a resilience coordinating council and all the subgroups that might form of that, do that. I should have said in the presentation that we're launching an education and training program for people involved with these community-based population level real resilience building initiatives. We'll start with a webinar program in the winter, but then it'll move once we get past COVID to an much more intensive thing. But one part of it is a whole training on helping everyone learn how to become aware of their racial and cultural and ethnic biases and how to manage that in ways that actually you can work with others in an equitable and just way and create positive outcomes for everyone. That's something you can offer to everybody in the community. Starting small, starting with group, and let people sort of grow out with that. So I think that intersectionality is just vital when you think about these issues. Tessa said that the central platform of some type is really needed to bring this coordination together. And at the same time, I think it was Gloria said that it was people are overwhelmed already. To add more is very, very difficult. That's something that is very common. What we have found is if you bring people together to a meeting like this on a regular basis, initially it's extra time, but then you find that you're actually reducing overlaps, reducing multiple things going on at the same time and filling in gaps, and it actually will become less work. It might take 2, 3, 4, 6 months, who knows, but keep that in mind that it might be a short-term extra effort for a significant long-term gain in that way. Let's see, very quickly. Teresa also said climate is a loaded word. And we find that also, we almost had a bill passed in the Oregon legislature 2 sessions ago to create population level mental wellness and resilience. It had to go through the Senate Preparedness Committee that was chaired by a Republican climate denier. I spent an hour with him. He completely got that we're seeing more wildfires, droughts, heat waves, blah, 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 but didn't believe in climate change. So we wrote the bill and just dropped climate change and just talked about disasters and toxic stresses. The bill passed unanimously out of the committee, and we didn't need to talk about it, but people get what's happening. The only reason it didn't pass is because, I don't know if you remember, the whole legislative session collapsed when the Republicans walked out. So because of another climate bill, a cap and trade bill. So there are ways to frame this and talk about it without having to focus in on climate change. Things are happening. Let's see, a couple other. Don also mentioned that the Yolo County, I think, has a health and all policies policy in place. And I think that's great. I'd like to add that you all could think about making it health and resilience in all policies. It's not just focusing on health, because what we've seen with those policies that say, okay, yeah, we think this won't affect health much, but are you also building mental wellness and resilience through these activities, or could they in some way be undermining it? And so the more you can actually include that and make it very specific, that's the other concern we have about just using the term trauma informed. Many people just think that, okay, I now understand how trauma affects people, but that's different than actually saying my commitment then is to build resilience for those, to prevent and heal those traumas. So it's trauma informed, trauma and resilience informed might be another way to say it. There's lots more I could say. We don't have a lot of time. I'd like to see if there's a little time for some other questions. I want to thank all the panelists for wonderful comments, and really it's inspiring, all the work you're doing.
Thanks so much, Bob. As we give a chance to the organizers to wrap this up, there was a request, Bob, for you to put back up your first slide that dealt with the future of climate changes. If you could do that while the organizers are speaking, is that something you can do?
I didn't have access to it. Whoever's doing that, maybe it's
Gail is putting that up. So Gail, did you wanna wrap up?
Well, I will get started, and Jan, I'd love for you to say something, and Chris, you may want to as well. Well, and a question for you, Bob. Can we share your slides? I'm assuming, I know in the past you have said share widely. So Kevin, I'm hoping that this is the slide that you wanted to see, but what we'll do is have, I assume, Chris, you can send it out to all the participants. So we will share the slides. Yeah, we'll share the slides. But I just want to, this was kind of beyond our hopes, I think. I'm Bob, I've heard you speak many times, and I always am moved by how well you capture in such a short amount of time, you capture the issues and you give us hope for what we can do about it. And I'm looking forward to looking at that slide again and your circle slide with that. I'm gonna make sure that I print that one out and have that handy. So thank you, Bob, for joining us and giving us clear direction on what we want to be doing with Cool Davis and the Ready group of Cool Davis. And all of the participants, of the panel participants, thank you all for sharing. Rachel, I have to say, I loved seeing those pictures. That was resilience building right there in it. And everybody that spoke, and I want to do a little shout out for Tessa. Thank you, Tessa, for coming and for making the connections, because the great work that Resilient Yolo is doing, but as you pointed out, we need to be sure that we're doing it in collaboration and doing it, breaking down those silos and doing things together. So I'm looking forward to us. This is a beginning of what we want to be doing. So I'm hoping, Jan, you can kind of take it from there and say a few things.
Sure. Thank you so much, Bob, and also to all the panelists. I think what we're seeing is that we really need to find a voice for population level resilience. And Bob, at the moment, your voice is pretty clear on this, and it's providing awesome leadership. So thank you so much. And to all of those people locally who have added their voice to this conversation, it seems like we do have enough of a kind of inspiration to really find ways to catalyze even greater collaboration than what is happening now, and hopefully also some integration. And, you know, we can integrate what we're doing already and grow that. And as we do that together as a community, we can also do it personally. And that is going to give us the resilience that we need to face what we know is coming and what we already know is here. So I'm really hopeful that in Davis and Yolo, and sort of based on the work of Resilient Yolo and Cool Davis, we can make some great things happen. So thank you so much, everybody.
Thank you, Jan. I also want to echo the my thanks for Bob for joining us today. It's a pleasure for me to see you again and to have you speak. You've been a voice in Cool Davis's work for many years. And I am really thrilled to for us to have brought all these different voices together from our own communities here in Davis and around the county. And I think this is a really good beginning to that conversation that we all hope we can continue. I would like to just say that as we follow up to this event, we're going to send a note out to everyone who registered. Not everybody could actually attend. We will be posting the video on our Live Cool Davis YouTube channel, and we'll send you a link along with copies of the presentations that were provided. And I think we'll also ask our panelists to chime in, since we didn't have time to cover all the questions that are in the Q&A, to give you some answers to some of those questions from our panelists if they're willing to do that. So we might kick those out to you tomorrow and see if you have any thoughts on any of those. I would encourage you to reach out to our coalition@cooldavis.org email if you're interested in participating in more conversations or helping with getting some training started in working with Ready and others in the county and in Davis to start to move this forward. So I know that Jan and Gail will be really thrilled to have more people helping out with that process. And I realize there's also one final question that seems to always occur to all of us, which is where are we going to get the resources to do these things that we would like to do? And I think working in climate change arenas over the last many years, that I've concluded that we really do have to have some conversations about where we put our resources and how we reallocate funding and restructure some of the things we're doing so that we can accelerate this kind of response to the future that we're facing. It behooves all of us to think deeply about what money we have and where we're investing it, whether we're not building seawalls in our community, but there are other things that we need to do. And we have some deep thinking to do about how we allocate our resources to meet the challenge of the future. So thank you again for all of you for joining us. If any other questions occur to you, we'll stay here for a little while and let you add more questions to the Q&A. But thank you all for your time today, and we're really glad to have you with us.
Great. Thank you all, and good luck to all of you on your work. I've got to leave now, but wish you all the best.
Thank you, Bob.
Thank you. Well, we still have some participants, but I think that this has been a very successful start to a conversation with some great thoughts and